Chapter 4. Dina, where are you? Leah thought impatiently, leaning against the tile in the hall outside the lunchroom. They had agreed to meet for lunch after fourth period on Monday. Kids were streaming past Leah, laughing, talking loudly, eager for lunch, but Dina was nowhere to be seen. As she watched everyone go past, Leah had to fight the feeling that they all knew the cruel joke that had been played on her, that they knew how foolish she had been, how gullible. They all knew, and they're all laughing at me. She avoided everyone's eyes, staring down at her sneakers. Marcy has spread the story all over school. I know she has. It had taken Leah so much effort just to return to school. She had spent all of Sunday moping around the house, feeling humiliated, betrayed, mortified beyond words. When Dina had called Sunday afternoon, wondering why she hadn't heard from Leah, the whole story had burst out of Leah in a stream of anger. Dina had tried to be comforting, but Leah detected a tone of "I told you so" in Dina's voice, which made Leah feel even more foolish and alone. And now here she was, standing by the door to the lunchroom with the whole school marching by, everyone staring at her, everyone grinning, everyone knows. Leah scolded herself for being paranoid, but she still avoided everyone's glance. Suddenly, someone bumped into her shoulder, hard. "Hey!" she cried out. "Sorry, he pushed me." A chubby guy with dark curly hair grinned at her while pointing at a kid beside him. She recognized him from her homeroom. His name was Ricky Shore, and he was always goofing around. He shoved his friend back, and they continued on into the lunchroom, carrying on like little kids. Everyone here is so immature, Leah thought glumly. Except for me. I'm not mature enough to be immature. She was about to give up on Dina when a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Hey, Leah." Leah swung around to see Don standing next to her, guilt written across his face. "Hi," she said coldly, forcing herself not to act surprised to see him there, forcing herself not to reveal any emotion at all. I don't know what to say," Don muttered, staring into her eyes. He had his hands stuffed in his jeans pockets. He rocked uncomfortably back and forth on his sneakers. Leah didn't reply. He continued to stare into her eyes. "I just want to, apologize." Leah glanced down the long hall, which had emptied out except for a few stragglers. She didn't say anything. "I wanted to call, to let you know," Don said, removing one hand from a pocket to rub the back of his neck. "Marcy, well, she's sort of jealous. He stopped, hoping she'd say something, hoping she'd help him out. But Leah didn't say a word. She turned her glance on him, leaving her face expressionless. He had beads of perspiration on his forehead even though it was cold in the hall. "Marcy's great, really," Don continued, still rocking up and down on his sneakers. "You've only seen the bad side of her. She just gets really jealous, that's all." He stopped, took a deep breath, and let it out, shaking his head. "I shouldn't be apologizing for her," he said, staring into Leah's face. "I should be apologizing for me. I'm really sorry, Leah." "Thanks for apologizing, Don," she said, keeping her voice low and steady. "Last week in the lunchroom," he continued, a little less awkwardly, "when I saw you, I thought—" He stopped suddenly. Leah followed his gaze down the hall. Marcy had just turned the corner. Leah felt a sharp stag of anger, mixed with dread. I'd better go," Don said quickly. "Sorry, really. I really am." He turned and, dodging two girls on their way to the lunchroom, hurried in a half-run to intercept Marcy. Leah remained against the wall, unmoving, watching Don and Marcy. He caught up to her, took her by the arm, and turned her around. They disappeared back around the corner. Wow, thought Leah. Marcy sure does have Don wrapped around her little finger. "Sorry I'm late," Dina said, appearing from behind Leah, grabbing Leah's shoulder. Leah, lost in thought, jumped in surprise. "Oh, hi!" "Wagner kept me after class. I totally blew the chem experiment. He wouldn't let me leave till I got it right." "Oh, that's okay," Leah said wistfully, following her friend into the lunchroom. "I'm not very hungry anyway." "You still thinking about Don and Marcy?" Dina asked sympathetically. "Yeah, I guess," Leah shrugged. "I just wish I could shut them out of my mind. Just shut the door on them. Lock it up and board it up, like the room in my attic." "The room in your attic?" Dina was totally mystified. "Never mind," Leah said, and picked up a lunch tray from the stack, burning hot and soaking wet as usual. After school, Leah pulled some books out of her locker, loaded her backpack, closed the locker, and prepared to lock it. It was then that she realized that Marcy was standing beside her. Marcy's short red hair was perfectly brushed, and she was wearing a very short green suede skirt over black tights and a silky green top that emphasized her full figure. Just standing next to her made Leah feel small and boyish. Marcy, what do you want? Leah asked, sounding more impatient than angry. I want to apologize, too, Marcy said softly. What? Leah hoisted the backpack onto her shoulders. I made Don apologize, and now I want to apologize, too. Leah had the sudden feeling that she was in a dream, that she was sound asleep, fashioning this whole scene from her subconscious. She stared past Marcy down the hall. The solid walls, the bright ceiling lights, the other kids at their lockers, all seemed to indicate that this wasn't a dream. It was really happening. You made Don apologize. Leah couldn't hide her surprise or her confusion. I went too far, Marcy said, staring into Leah's eyes. I really did. I'm not a mean person, usually, and this time I just went too far. After Saturday, I felt terrible. So did I, Leah said bitterly. I want to make it up to you, Marcy said. We're having a sorority meeting tomorrow after school. Would you like to come see if you'd be interested in joining? Leah stared into Marcy's eyes, trying to read her thoughts. Was she sincere? Was she really inviting Leah to join her sorority, to become part of her group? Leah had always wanted to belong, really belong, but wherever she went, she had always been the outsider, the shy outsider. I didn't know there were sororities at Shadyside, Leah stammered. Of course there are, Marcy smiled. We're meeting after school tomorrow in room 409. Please come, Leah. I really would like to make it up to you for last weekend. I just feel so guilty. Leah pulled away from Marcy angrily. Hey, I'm not stupid, she snapped, glaring at her. This room is only 3 stories high. There is no room 409. Marcy threw her head back and laughed. Never mind, she cried in a mocking voice. She turned and hurried away, still laughing to herself. What a dumb joke, Leah tried to call after her, but her voice choked in her throat and the words didn't come out. Leah slammed her fist angrily against her locker. The pain ran up her arm to her shoulder. Ow! At least Marcy's stupid joke didn't work. At least Leah was smart enough to remember how many floors there were at Shadyside. Yeah, I'm real smart, Leah told herself bitterly. Real smart. She checked to make sure she had secured her lock, then glumly began to trudge down the long hall toward the front entrance. Why does Marcy want to torture me, she wondered. Why does she hate me so much? She can have Don. Really, I'm not interested in him. I hope the 2 of them are very happy. Let them just leave me alone to live my lonely life. As she stepped out the door, she raised her eyes to the sky. It was gray and threatening rain, and she felt the gusty autumn wind whip up and sting her face. Looking down at the bottom of the steps, she saw Marcy on the sidewalk talking to a cluster of girls. When Leah stepped off the steps, they instantly stopped talking and glanced over at her. Then they all started to laugh. Marcy was telling them about me, Leah realized. Anger she had never felt before rose up through her body. I've got to get back at Marcy, Leah thought, frightened by her own vehemence. I've got to get back at her. Chapter 5. Leah pushed stop on the remote control, then pushed rewind. The VCR clicked obediently and began to rewind the movie. It was Saturday night, and she was home alone, stretched out on a couch in the den, having just watched Ghost for the 3rd time in as many months. Or maybe the 4th. She had lost track. Patrick Swayze is a real babe, she thought, stretching sleepily. He can come haunt me any time. Yawning, Leah glanced up at the grandfather clock in the corner of the room besides the cartons of unpacked books. 2:15. She had momentarily forgotten that the clock didn't work. It was just another piece of valuable junk her dad had bought at a garage sale, intending to fix it when he had the chance. She smiled thinking about her dad. In his job as an electronics company recruiter, he did nothing with his hands, except maybe push papers back and forth across a desk. But when he got home, his hands were constantly busy with projects, building, examining, repairing everything, as if they had to make up for all the time they spent in repose during the day. Her mother, Leah knew, had the same energy, the same drive to fix things up, to make things better, to improve the world by painting it or wallpapering it. By the time they were finished with this old dump, Leah thought, it'll look like a real home. But then, of course, it'll be time to move. When I get married, I'm going to settle into one place and never move, she told herself, smiling at the thought. Maybe I'll just dig a hole in the ground, a soft, comfy hole, just big enough for me and my family, and live in it forever, rooted there like a tree. She wandered up to her room, turning off lights along the way, making sure the porch light was on for her parents. They were at a party across town being given by a man from her dad's new office. A welcoming party, her dad had described it. Wish someone would give me a welcoming party, Leah thought wistfully. Her desk clock said it was only 11:30. I don't care how early it is. I'm tired and I'm going to sleep, she decided. The next day, Sunday, she and Dina had made plans to go play tennis at an indoor tennis club Dina's family belonged to in the North Hill section of town. Something to look forward to, Leah thought, yawning sleepily. She pushed Georgie to the foot of the bed, clicked off the lamp on her night table, and slid under the covers. Darkness covered her like a soft blanket. Outside the twin windows, clouds blocked the moon. The sky was gray and still. Leah settled her head on the pillow, staring up at the smooth blackness of the ceiling. At least I was able to bring my old bed with me, she thought happily. Something familiar. She had almost drifted into a pleasant sleep when she heard the noise again. Clearer this time, above her head. Footsteps. It had to be footsteps. But how could it be? She tried to ignore the sound, shutting her eyes tightly and pulling the soft feather pillow up over her ears. But she could still hear them. Footsteps. The ceiling groaned under them. One step, then another, then in the other direction, as if someone was pacing above her head. Someone upstairs in the attic. Or something. But how could that be? The round attic window was too high and too small for anyone to climb in, and there was no other entryway. Leah sat up. The ceiling squeaked directly overhead. Shoes against the floor above. Tap, tap, then back. Tap, tap. Louder now. No. Leah kicked off the covers and stood up, her heart pounding. Hey, she called out, staring up at the dark ceiling. She listened. The tapping stopped for a moment, then started again. Suddenly very frightened, she clicked on the lamp, then turned on the ceiling light. She pulled her silky blue robe on over her pajamas, and slipped into the rubber thongs to use as slippers. Maybe I should call the police, she thought. After all, here I am all alone in the house, and someone is definitely walking around up there. But of course, there couldn't be anyone walking around up there, and if someone had somehow gotten in up there, why was he just pacing back and forth? Why hadn't he made any move to come down? That's because it's all just by imagination, or creepy old houses. Maybe there's a shingle loose on the roof. Yes, of course, that has to be it, a loose shingle, and every time the wind blows, it tilts up, then comes down with a tapping noise. Leah felt a little better, but she knew she had to find out for sure. She was surprised to find herself on the metal ladder outside her bedroom door. It was as if she had sleepwalked out into the hall. And now there she was, climbing the ladder despite the heavy feeling of dread in her chest. Climbing the ladder and pushing the trapdoor up and out of the way, and climbing higher, high enough to peer into the long, low attic. Anybody up here? She called, surprised by her own bravery. The darkness was thick and cold, and silent. Of course there isn't anyone up here, she told herself. She pulled herself up onto the attic floor, then groped along the wall until she found a light switch. A single bulb suspended from the ceiling cast pale yellow light over the room. Leah stared at the window, then turned and let her eyes examine the boarded-up room. Nothing. No one. Silence. Breathing a sigh of relief, she moved to turn off the light. Then she heard the footsteps again, clearly, very close. 3 steps one way, 2 steps back. Leah looked around expectantly, listening, hoping the noise came from above her, from the roof, hoping her broken shingle theory would prove true. But she knew at once where the sounds were coming from. They were coming from the room, from behind the locked door. This is crazy, she thought. But she moved to the door, taking off her thongs so she could walk even more silently. She leaned against one of the 2x4s, pressing her ear against the wood. This is crazy. This is so crazy. She continued to hear the sounds. Yes, she heard them coming from the other side of the door. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I must be going crazy. This room had been locked up for 100 years, locked and blockaded for 100 years. Hello? Can you hear me? She shouted into the door. She leaned forward expectantly, pressing her ear hard against the old wood. From the other side she heard nothing now. The sounds had stopped. Leah's heart was pounding. She tingled all over. The dim yellow light made everything unreal, as if she were living in an old faded movie. The sounds had stopped, as if in response to her call. Hello, she called again, cupping her hands around her mouth and shouting against the door. Silence on the other side. A heavy silence, as if someone was listening to her. And then she heard a soft plopping, a dripping sound. Leah raised her head just in time to see the dark liquid begin to ooze out from the top of the doorway. It descended rapidly in a single wave, flowing straight down the front of the door to the floor, splashing at Leah's feet. Leah screamed and jumped back. It was a thick, dark liquid. It was blood, a curtain of blood, pouring down the door, forming a dark, widening circle on the floor at her feet. Holding her hands to her face, unable to take her eyes from the flowing waterfall of blood, she screamed again and again. Chapter 6. Dina, please, hurry! Leah had been screaming into the phone without realizing it. Just try to calm down, Dina said, sounding very alarmed on the other end of the line. You sound hysterical, Leah. You're not making any sense. Of course I'm not making sense, Leah shrieked, gripping the phone tightly, gasping for breath. It doesn't make any sense. Please, hurry. Okay, I just have to get some shoes on, Dina told her. I'll be right there. Where are your parents, anyway? I don't know. Someone's house. They didn't leave a number, Leah said breathlessly, staring at the floor in front of her bedroom door, as if expecting the wave of blood to follow her downstairs. I hate Fear Street, Dina exclaimed. Why do you have to live on Fear Street? I had a horrible experience on Fear Street last year. Come on, Dina, I'm all alone here, Leah pleaded. Okay, bye. The line went dead. Leah replaced the receiver, still staring at the floor by the doorway. Of course my story doesn't make sense, she thought. How could it make sense? Footsteps in a room that's been boarded up for 100 years? A waterfall of blood pouring down over a door? She dropped down onto the edge of her bed, her hand still on the phone receiver. She listened. The house was silent now. So silent she could hear the soft ticking of her desk clock. So silent she could hear the brush of wind through the leafless old trees in the front yard. It was quiet up there now. But was the blood still flowing? Was it flooding the attic? Would it soon seep through her ceiling and down onto her bed? Terrified, she glanced up at the ceiling. That enormous circular dark spot around the brass light fixture. Had it been there before? Those long, straight cracks in the plaster. She didn't remember seeing them either. I've got to get out of here, she thought. She darted to her closet, swung open the door, and pulled a light chain. Nothing in the closet seemed familiar to her. Were those her clothes hung on the bar, stacked on the shelves, tossed on the floor, piles of socks and underwear, blouses and t-shirts still waiting to be sorted and put away? Nothing here is mine, she thought, gripped with panic. Nothing in this house is familiar. Nothing in this house is right. Frantically, she pulled off her pajamas, kicking them out of her way, and grabbed a pair of jeans and a green long-sleeved sweater. Where should I go? Where can I go? If only Mom and Dad were here. But what could they do about the blood? The pouring blood! Leah started out of her room, pausing at the doorway, looking both ways down the hall, then realized she was barefoot. Where do you think you're going? She asked herself out loud. Her voice sounded small and frightened in a vast old house. You're not thinking clearly. Glancing up to the top of the ladder, she made sure the trapdoor was in place. Yes, even in her panic, even as she had to run from the blood, run from the attic, pulled herself in a frenzy down the ladder, trembling all over, more frightened than she had ever been in her life, more frightened than she had ever dreamed possible. She had remembered to replace the trapdoor. To her relief, it remained in place, and the house remained quiet. But upstairs, what? What was happening in the attic? I'll call the police, she decided. Why hadn't she thought of it before? Of course, the police. She ran downstairs, still barefoot, the wooden stairs cold beneath her feet. She turned on all the lights as she hurried back to the kitchen. After she snatched up the receiver of the kitchen phone, she dialed 911. Leah heard static over the phone line, before the ringing. A few seconds later, a man's voice came on the line. Sergeant Barnett. Hello, I need help. How can I help you? He asked, sounding concerned. I mean, there's blood. In my attic? Leah stammered, staring out the kitchen window into the blackness of the night. I beg your pardon. Please, come. I have to show you. It's blood. Pouring down. I'm all alone here. Leah realized she wasn't making much sense, but her mind was spinning. The words wouldn't fit together right. She spun away from the window, staring back into the long hallway, leading to the front of the house, expecting to see something or someone standing there. But the hallway was empty. I'm really losing it, she thought. Please, hurry, she pleaded into the phone. I'll send someone right over, the sergeant said. Give me your name and address. Leah's mind went blank. Name and address. So this was what panic felt like. This was how it blanked your mind, made you forget everything but your fear. I've got to get out of here, she thought. The doorbell rang. Dina! Her memory returned. She told the sergeant her name and address. The doorbell rang again, longer this time, more insistent. Let me just make sure I have it right, Sergeant Barnett said. Leah groaned. Please, hurry! The doorbell rang and rang again. The police sergeant repeated Leah's address. We'll have a car there in 5 minutes, he said. Will you be okay till then? I hope so, Leah said, hanging up and running through the hallway to the front door. She pulled it open just as Dina rang again. Leah, you didn't answer the bell. I was so worried. Dina's blonde hair was windblown, tossed wildly around her face. Her wool poncho flapped behind her in a gusting wind. Thanks for coming. Come on, hurry, it's so windy, Leah said, checking up and down the street. Leaves swirled across the lawn in a wild, unending dance. The old trees bent and swayed. It seemed to her as if the entire front yard had come alive. Shivering, she slammed the front door. I'm so scared, she said. I don't really understand, Dina said, yanking off her poncho and tossing it onto the banister. You went up to the attic and saw blood. I was in my room, Leah explained again, asleep, but I woke up because I heard noises upstairs. Upstairs in the attic? Yes, Leah told her. Footsteps. At least, it sounded like footsteps, but I knew that was impossible. So I went up to the attic, and the door. Blood started to pour down the door, and... Dina was listening to all this open-mouthed, her eyes wide with disbelief. Suddenly, her expression changed, and she stared intently at Leah. Leah, it was a dream, Dina said softly. She reached out and placed her hands gently on Leah's trembling shoulders. What? It was a dream. It had to be. You were asleep, right? And you dreamed the rest. And then you woke up in your room thinking it was real. And you called me. Leah backed out of her friend's hands. You think I'm cracking up, huh? No, of course not, Dina said patiently. Some dreams can be really vivid. I have very real dreams, too. It wasn't a dream, Leah insisted angrily. The blood poured right down to my feet. Dina glanced down at Leah's bare feet. Did you wash it off? No, of course not. I didn't have time, Leah replied, glancing down at her feet, too. There were no bloodstains on her feet, not a trace. She lifted her head up. I jumped back. I got out of the way of the blood. Then I ran downstairs. Leah, Dina started, but Leah grabbed her friend's hand and pulled her to the doorway. Hey, what are you doing? I'll show you, Leah said. Dina's hand was still cold from the outside. Come on, I'll show you it wasn't a dream. But, Leah, wait, Dina held back. Maybe we shouldn't go up there. Why are you so frightened if it was only a dream? Leah asked, challenging her friend. Dina shook her head as if trying to get her thoughts straight. I don't like dark old attics. Listen, Leah said, tugging at Dina. You said I was crazy, so... I did not say you were crazy. I just said it all sounded like a dream, like you're having a nightmare. It's a nightmare, all right, Leah said, sighing. But it's real, Dina. It's all real. Come on. She pulled with renewed strength. Okay. Don't pull me, Dina said. I can't believe I'm doing this. They hesitated at the ladder next to Leah's room. They both stared up at the trap door and listened. Silence. Come on, Leah said, whispering. She started up the ladder. I'll just show you the blood. Then we'll close it up again. I really don't like this. Dina stepped onto the ladder, staying close behind Leah. Leah slid the trapdoor up and away. They both stared up into the silent darkness. That's funny, Leah said, glancing down at her friend, bewildered. I left the attic light on. I'm sure I didn't turn it off. Dina stared back at her, didn't say anything. Then she finally said, Maybe we should get a flashlight or something. No, I'll just turn on the light, Leah said, and disappeared up through the rectangular opening in the ceiling. Leah, please, Dina called softly, her trembling voice revealing her fear. Don't go. Don't. It was too late. Leah had stepped onto the attic floor, and Dina was pulling herself up behind her. The rough wood of the attic floor felt cold beneath Leah's bare feet. She groped around, found the light switch, and turned it on. The long, narrow attic filled with yellow light. There, Leah said, pointing. There's the door, and look. Both girls huddled together, peering across the attic through the dim yellow light. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. Above their heads, the wind was a roar against the roof. Leah was the first to break the silence. I don't believe it, she said, her hands pressed tightly against her face.